The morning I stood alone. Hi, I'm Emily Carter, 28 years old. If you're new to this channel, subscribe and stay with us to hear real, intense stories like this. Stories that make your heart race and your thoughts linger long after you've finished listening. I woke up this morning with a strange kind of calm. The sunlight spilled across my apartment floor, painting golden lines over the scattered papers and empty coffee mugs. My phone vibrated with notifications I didn't read. Bills, emails, messages from my parents. I am 28. A few months ago, I found out I was pregnant. And today, I was going to tell my family. It wasn't fear that made my hands shake. It was anticipation. A low, quiet tension settled in my chest, tightening with each breath. I imagined their faces. Mom Karen, always precise, with sharp eyes that could make anyone shrink. Dad Richard, proud, stubborn, almost impossible to persuade. And then Madison, my sister, always radiant, always competitive, always measuring my life against hers. I dressed carefully, nothing flashy, nothing dramatic, neutral tones, hair tied back. Not because I wanted to impress them, but because I wanted to feel in control. When I arrived at the dining room, the table was set perfectly. The kind of arrangement that speaks of preparation and control. Mom sat with that usual posture, upright, expectant. Dad leaned slightly forward, scanning me as if evaluating my worth. Madison sipped her coffee like a queen surveying her court. I took a deep breath. I have something to tell you, I began. My voice shook only slightly. I'm pregnant. The room froze. Mom blinked once, twice, then let out a small, deliberate sigh. Another burden, she said. It hit me like a winter wind, cold, cutting, and unrelenting. Not a word of congratulations, no warmth, no acknowledgement. Just burden. Madison's lips curved into that polished, almost smug smile. Well, Mom, at least this month we have something to celebrate, my house closing. She lifted her coffee cup ever so slightly, like a toast. Dad's nod was deliberate slow. We wish you had never been born, he said. And now there will be two of you. I swallowed. I wanted to react. I wanted to cry, yell, anything. But I had rehearsed this, and I knew the strength of silence. I smiled, small, controlled, and left the table. Outside, the air was cool, almost crisp. I walked slowly to my car. My chest tightened, not from fear, but from resolve. I wasn't running. I wasn't defeated. I had already begun preparing for this moment months ago. I had discovered something. Something that could protect me, my baby, and force my family to recognize reality. Harper & Co., my father's logistics company, was thinly structured, heavily leveraged, and dangerously reliant on personal guarantees. And my name? Still on official documents as a minority signatory. A detail Dad assumed I would never notice. I had noticed. I had acted. That morning, I filed all the necessary papers. Resignation, liability separation, and notification to the bank. Every decision was legal. Careful, strategic. Not for revenge, but for protection. Banks don't like instability. Suppliers react to uncertainty. By midday, their primary line of credit began to trigger automatic review alerts. Audits were scheduled. The house Madison was about to purchase. Suddenly on hold. I didn't gloat. I didn't tell anyone what I had done. Instead, I went home, poured a glass of water, and breathed. My heart still raced, but there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing I had reclaimed my power. 2 days later, my phone rang. Mom, frantic. Why is the bank asking about compliance reviews? She demanded. I replied calmly, I removed my liability exposure today. Richard didn't argue, didn't yell, he simply hung up. Madison texted, venom in her words, "You're selfish." I typed slowly, deliberately, "No, I'm responsible." Months passed. My baby was born. The hospital room smelled faintly of antiseptic and soft baby powder. Dad appeared quietly, standing at the foot of the bed. No yelling, no judgment, just looking, watching. "You didn't take everything from us," he said softly. "No," I replied. "I just stopped letting you take from me." The truth I realized then was simple. Power isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's about withdrawal, about boundaries, about protecting the future when others refuse to. They had called my child a burden, but what they really feared was losing control. And on that morning, when I had signed those papers, I had reclaimed it. I had stopped being invisible. I had become seen. And for the first time, I felt completely, undeniably, free. After leaving the dinner, I didn't go home. I drove to the little cafe on 5th Street, the one with cracked windows, and the smell of roasted coffee beans that always reminded me of childhood mornings. I sat by the window, fingers tracing the rim of my cup, staring at the way light bounced off the wet pavement. My mind kept replaying the words my mother and father had spoken. Another burden. "We wish you had never been born. And now there will be 2 of you." I am 28. I have always measured my worth by resilience. Today that measure became tangible. Today I realize survival isn't passive. It's active, deliberate, strategic. I opened my laptop. Legal files, corporate statements, bank communications. Anything tied to Harper & Co. I had been reviewing them for months. But tonight, under the dim cafe light, it all crystallized. The company was a house of cards. Thin cash flow, high leverage, personal guarantees tied to family assets, hidden exposure. And me, minor signatory, still legally liable for decisions I had long disapproved of. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't malice. This was survival, and it was time to act. I drafted emails meticulously, each word chosen for clarity, authority, and legality. One to the bank, notification of resignation and separation of liability. One to the company's auditor, confirmation of procedural compliance. One to myself, a reminder that I had the right, the knowledge, and the strength to protect my child. I reread each line. No errors. No hesitation. Perfect. That night, I returned home. Emily Carter, 28, alone in a quiet apartment. I sat on the edge of the bed and touched my stomach. A small kick, a heartbeat strong and unwavering. A reminder that life continues, regardless of judgment or control. The next morning, I received the first ripple of consequence. An email from Mr. Lang, the bank officer. Subject: urgent, review triggered. Lines of credit under automatic audit due to operational changes. Suppliers flagged for compliance confirmation. Madison's house. Conditional on liquidity verification from Harper & Co. The system was moving, slowly, deliberately. And I had set it in motion. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I simply observed. Because control isn't shown in noise. It's shown in movement, in unseen forces that shift without warning. 2 days later, Madison called. Her voice sharp, brittle. "You're selfish, Emily. Do you realize what you've done?" I paused, inhaled, and replied calmly, "No, I'm responsible." The line went silent. I could hear her processing, choking on words she didn't have. Mom called next. Her voice trembled, though she tried to hide it. "Why is the bank asking about compliance reviews?" I answered evenly. I removed my liability exposure today. The changes are legal and documented. Silence. Then the phone clicked. She hung up. Even Dad didn't respond immediately. For the first time, he had no words. Not because he didn't understand. Because control, the one thing he wielded like a weapon, had been subtly taken from him. By midweek, the audit began. Temporary, formal, procedural, but enough to pause all non-essential operations. Suppliers called, asking for clarification. Madison's house purchase delayed conditional. I didn't ruin anyone. I simply drew a line, a boundary they had assumed didn't exist. And yet, the emotional weight of it all was enormous. I cried quietly in the shower, not from fear, not from regret, but from the raw intensity of holding life and control in my hands at once. Pregnant, aware, responsible. Evening came and Daniel, my fiancé, called. His voice calm, reassuring. Emily, you're doing the right thing. It's not about them. It's about you, about your child. I closed my eyes, imagining his face. Strong, steady, watching over me. The world outside the apartment felt lighter just knowing he existed. By Friday, the tension escalated. An internal memo from Harper & Co.'s compliance team outlined changes. Automatic review triggered. Lines temporarily frozen. Operational decisions flagged. Mom texted, "This is insane. You can't do this. You're ruining everything." I replied, "I am securing my family, not destroying yours." The message didn't soothe her. It never would. But the line was clear. The consequences real. That weekend, I walked in the park, feeling the first kick of my baby again. It was life-affirming. It was grounding. A reminder that no amount of parental expectation, judgment, or entitlement could diminish the future I was building. By Sunday evening, Dad called. His tone subdued. Not angry, not pleading, just tentative. "You didn't have to go this far," he said. I sat back, arms crossed, and answered firmly. I did. For the child, for myself, for clarity, and for boundaries that were never respected before. The week ended with quiet. No celebratory calls. No apologies. Just realization. And I watched it unfold, not with satisfaction, but with profound responsibility. Because strength isn't loud. It isn't vindictive. It isn't about taking everything. Strength is the deliberate act of standing your ground, protecting life, and creating consequences for neglect and disrespect. I woke up before dawn. The city was quiet, but my mind wasn't. I'm Emily Carter, 28, pregnant, and for the first time in my life, I felt the weight of true responsibility, not just for myself, but for a life growing inside me. If you're new to this channel, subscribe and stay with us to hear real stories that are emotional, raw, and full of tension. This is one of those moments. The first ripple came in the form of an email from Harper & Co. Compliance. Subject: Immediate action required. Operational changes. Lines frozen. Payments pending. Suppliers demanding clarification. The chain reaction I had triggered weeks ago was now undeniable. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. I had expected this. I had planned for it. And yet, the pressure was almost physical. Madison called. Her voice sharp, clipped. "Emily, you've gone too far. Dad's furious. Mom is crying. You've thrown the entire company into chaos. Do you even care?" I put my hand on my stomach, feeling the tiny kick, a reminder of why I was doing this. "I care," I said calmly. "About the baby. About myself. About boundaries you've all ignored for decades." She paused, realizing that my calm was deliberate. You're impossible, she spat. No, I'm responsible, I replied softly. By midday, Dad Richard finally called. His voice was restrained but tense. Emily, what did you do? I explained step by step, in precise, unemotional language. I had removed myself from liability. I had notified the bank. I had ensured the company remained compliant. Nothing illegal, nothing destructive, just careful separation of risk. His silence was long. Then he said, almost whispering, You've disrupted everything. Yes, I said, and I did it legally. For me, for my child, for clarity. Later, Daniel came over. His presence was calming, steady. Emily, he said, this is bigger than anything you've ever done. But you're doing it right. Don't let them guilt you. Don't let their fear become yours. I nodded. I trusted him more than I trusted anyone in that family. His eyes held understanding and a quiet kind of strength. Meanwhile, the bank's auditors were already digging. Temporary freezes on accounts. Pending approvals. Red flags everywhere. Madison's house closing, on hold indefinitely. Mom texted, frantic, You can't do this. Do you even realize what you've started? I replied carefully, I do. And I did it for protection, not destruction. By Thursday, the tension at Harper & Co. had become palpable. Employees whispered about operational uncertainty. Vendors called repeatedly. Suppliers demanded immediate answers. And Dad, he was quiet. He was always quiet when he had no control. I sat in my apartment that evening, journal open, fingers hovering over the keys. I wrote down everything, the chain of events, the decisions I made, the moral reasoning behind each step. It was a way to process, a way to anchor myself. That night, a small, unexpected victory arrived. An email from the bank, compliance documentation verified. No legal violation detected. Operations may continue once revised approvals are submitted. I breathed, letting it sink in. I hadn't destroyed anyone. I had enforced accountability. The cracks in the system, built on assumptions and entitlement, were visible now. And for once, my family had to recognize that I was not invisible. Saturday morning, Madison stormed over to my apartment. Her hands shaking, face red with frustration. You think you can control everything, don't you? She demanded. I looked at her calmly. No, I'm just protecting myself and my child. She scoffed. You've ruined Dad's company. You've ruined my house deal. You've made everything about you. I didn't raise my voice. I made it about fairness, responsibility, and truth. That's not ruin, it's accountability. Her eyes widened. For the first time, she saw clarity. She didn't like it, but she couldn't deny it. By Sunday, Mom tried a different tactic, manipulation. She sent a long email detailing guilt, family legacy, and the shame of breaking tradition. I read it carefully. Each word, each accusation fell flat against the reality I had created. I replied politely, professionally. Your feelings are acknowledged. My responsibility is to protect my child and my future. All actions taken were legal and necessary. I hope we can move forward with honesty. No theatrics, no anger, just truth. Later that evening, I sat on the balcony, the city lights twinkling below. I touched my stomach and whispered, You'll be safe. You'll have boundaries. You'll know strength. The baby kicked again, a rhythmic, steady reminder of life, resilience, and hope. Over the next few days, life began to normalize in subtle, profound ways. Dad began holding meetings differently, consulting more openly with staff, listening more, controlling less. Mom stopped her constant critiques and began offering support, tentatively, carefully. Madison learned the lessons she had resisted, understanding that entitlement has limits. And I continued preparing for the baby, balancing the quiet moments of life with the responsibilities I had claimed. In reflection, I realized that power is not always about destruction. It's about action, timing, clarity. I didn't take everything from my family. I simply reclaimed what was mine. I drew lines where there had been none. And in doing so, I built a foundation for my child, for myself, and for a more honest, respectful family dynamic. The baby moved again, and I smiled, whispering softly, "You'll grow up knowing boundaries. You'll grow up safe, and you'll grow up with strength." For the first time in a long while, I felt completely at peace. Because boundaries protect, responsibility empowers, and love, quiet, deliberate love, can change everything. This story is fundamentally about courage, self-respect, and personal boundaries. Emily Carter, a 28-year-old woman, faces the pressure, control, and unrealistic expectations of her family. It shows how family dynamics, sometimes driven by pride, entitlement, or habit, can create emotional stress for someone trying to live with integrity. For Emily, being pregnant adds another layer of responsibility. Her life and the life of her unborn child depend on the choices she makes. Yet her parents and sister attempt to impose their control, dismissing her feelings and labeling her situation as a burden. Instead of reacting impulsively or seeking revenge, Emily demonstrates that true strength comes from calm, deliberate, and well-planned action. She uses legal and procedural tools, bank notifications, company documents, and compliance measures to protect herself and her child. She doesn't destroy her family. She simply establishes firm boundaries and ensures that her autonomy is respected. The story highlights that power isn't always loud or aggressive. Strength can exist quietly through responsibility, clarity, and strategic action. By acting deliberately, Emily forces her family to acknowledge her voice and choices. Over time, they begin to understand and respect her limits, even if reluctantly. The most powerful part of the story is Emily's inner peace. She demonstrates that valuing yourself, claiming your rights, and protecting your decisions gives immense strength, even in the face of family pressure. The baby in the story serves as a symbol of life, hope, and moral guidance, a reminder that her actions are about protection, not punishment. In short, the story teaches us: 1. Boundaries matter. Even if others don't respect you initially, it's essential to define and maintain your limits. 2. Strength can be quiet. True power comes from thoughtful, deliberate actions, not revenge or destruction. 3. Take responsibility for yourself and your future, especially for those who depend on you. 4. Respect is earned gradually. Even if someone refuses to acknowledge it at first, consistent integrity and firm boundaries eventually command recognition. This story is more than just a family drama. It's a story about taking control of your life, claiming mental and emotional freedom, and discovering your inner strength. Emily's emotional resilience, her careful strategies, and her foresight teach us how to face personal crises with courage, clarity, and determination. That's all I ask. Understanding will come with time. Compliance will validate it. And for once, my boundaries are clear. He nodded slowly, a silent truce forming. By the end of Part 4, Harper & Co. remained operational under intense scrutiny. Madison's house closing delayed. She was forced to act independently. Mom's emotional appeals were weakened by Emily's calm, firm boundaries. Dad began to recognize the necessity of limits. Emily remained the moral and strategic anchor, balancing family chaos and personal responsibility. The baby remained a symbol of life, resilience, and purpose. I woke up to sunlight spilling through the blinds, warm and soft, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a moment of absolute calm. I'm Emily Carter, 28, pregnant, and if you're new to this channel, subscribe and stay with us to experience stories of courage, resilience, and the quiet power of standing your ground. The city was alive with morning sounds, distant car horns, the hum of early traffic. But inside my apartment, there was a different kind of rhythm. My heartbeat, my baby's heartbeat, the gentle pulse of life moving steadily forward despite weeks of tension, fear, and confrontation. The week had been intense. Harper & Co.'s auditors had completed their compliance review. Temporary freezes were lifted, operational approvals restored. Madison's house closing, delayed but progressing after she had been forced to confront her own reliance on her parents' unchecked influence. Mom's emotional manipulations had lost potency. Dad Richard had begun to understand, slowly, that control is earned, not assumed. And me, I had remained steadfast, calm, unwavering. Daniel arrived that morning, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers, his usual quiet smile in place. "You look tired," he said softly. I laughed lightly. "I am, but I feel lighter, like the weight has shifted, and I can finally breathe." He kissed my forehead. "You've done everything right, Emily. You've protected the baby. You've protected yourself. And you've done it without breaking anyone unnecessarily." I nodded. His words warmed me, a quiet confirmation of what I already knew. The first ripple came in the form of a call from my father. "Emily, I've reviewed everything," he began, hesitant. "You acted responsibly, legally, professionally. I don't fully understand all the details, but I see now that your decisions were measured, calculated, and necessary." I listened, holding the phone tightly, feeling the tension dissolve with each word. "Yes, Dad," I said calmly. "All I wanted was to ensure boundaries and responsibility. That's what's fair for me, for my child, and for the family." There was a long pause. Then quietly he said, "I'm proud of you." The words, so rare, struck me like sunlight after rain. Mom, ever dramatic, tried one last appeal. "Emily, can't we just pretend none of this happened? Family is supposed to support each other," she said, voice quivering. I placed a hand on my stomach, feeling the baby's gentle movement. "Mom, this isn't about pretending. This is about truth. Accountability. Boundaries. Support exists when respect exists. That's all I ask." For the first time, I heard silence on the other end of the line. Not defiance, not anger, just recognition. Later that day, Madison arrived. Her usual confident posture was gone. She sat on the edge of my couch, hands clasped. You were right," she admitted quietly. "I relied too much on privileges, on Dad, on Mom. I didn't think about consequences." I smiled softly. "It's not about being right. It's about learning responsibility, about protecting what matters." She nodded slowly, a tentative truce forming between us. The baby kicked again. I laughed softly, resting my hand on my stomach. Each movement a reminder of life, resilience, and the quiet power of calculated action. By the evening, the family had begun to recalibrate. Harper & Co. continued operations, now more transparent. Madison's house deal moved forward with independent financial responsibility. Mom began acknowledging boundaries she had never respected. Dad showed signs of reflection, understanding the limits of control. And I had reclaimed autonomy, legal clarity, and emotional peace. That night, Daniel and I sat on the balcony. The city lights shimmered below us, endless and beautiful. "I never imagined it would be like this," he said softly. "Like what?" I asked. "Like you, standing firm, protecting life, teaching lessons without breaking anyone. You've done something remarkable." I pressed a hand to my stomach. "The baby doesn't know it yet, but this is the world that they'll grow up in. A world where boundaries are respected, where responsibility matters, and where strength doesn't have to mean cruelty." He smiled, holding my hand. "They'll be lucky to have you." Over the next week, small changes began to ripple through the family. Dad became more cautious in his decisions. Mom softened slightly, recognizing the limits of control. Madison was forced to acknowledge her own reliance on privileges she had taken for granted. I didn't relish any of it. I didn't gloat. I simply maintained clarity. Strength isn't loud. It isn't revenge. It isn't aggression. Strength is knowing when to act, how to act, and for whom. And I had acted for life, for love, for integrity. The weekend ended, but the tension hadn't. I'm Emily Carter, 28, and I had spent months preparing for this, but nothing could fully capture the quiet, grinding weight of holding a life and a family's accountability in one hand. If you're new to this channel, subscribe and stay with us to follow real, emotional stories that show the consequences of standing your ground. Monday morning, I opened my laptop and found it flooded with emails. Harper & Co.'s auditors had escalated their internal review. Compliance was asking for clarification on every operational move made in the past 2 years. Suppliers were calling, anxious. Vendors wanted reassurance. And Madison, she had texted again. "Emily, this is insane. Dad's furious. Mom is crying. You've ruined everything for me. How can you be so selfish?" I looked at the words, breathed, and typed back deliberately. "I am protecting myself and my child. Responsibility is not selfish." She didn't reply. By midday, Dad Richard called. His voice was low, measured, cautious. "Emily, you've set off a chain of chaos. People are watching. Suppliers, banks. I never expected this from you." I smiled quietly, in a way that no one could see. "I acted responsibly," I said. "Nothing illegal, nothing destructive. But I drew boundaries that should have existed years ago." There was silence on the line. I could hear the weight of realization settling over him. For the first time, he was aware that control had limits. I spent the afternoon reviewing the company accounts. Every line, every balance, every operational approval passed through my eyes. I wasn't trying to dominate. I was ensuring accountability, protection, safety. The baby kicked. A small steady rhythm against my palm. A heartbeat of clarity in the midst of chaos. By evening, Madison showed up at my apartment again. Her posture was defensive. Arms crossed, jaw tight. "You're impossible," she said. "You think the world revolves around you and your baby." I looked at her steadily. "No," I said calmly. "I think the world revolves around truth, responsibility, boundaries. You have chosen convenience. I have chosen reality." Her eyes widened, a flicker of recognition. It wasn't apology, not even acceptance. Just awareness. Mom Karen called later that night. Her voice quivering, almost pleading. "Emily, you've made a mess. Can't you just let this go? Family is supposed to stick together." I exhaled slowly. "Family also has a responsibility to respect boundaries, Mom. I am acting legally, ethically, and for the safety of my child. That is not a mess." She didn't answer. The next day, Harper & Co.'s auditors delivered more updates. Red flags on operational approvals. Requests for clarification on executive signatures. Supplier contracts under review. Madison's house closing delayed again. Dad's pride wounded. Mom's manipulations failing. I felt the tension, but not fear. I felt control, not dominance. By midweek, Daniel, my fiancé, came over with a warm smile and quiet presence. "You're handling this beautifully," he said. I leaned back against the sofa, closed my eyes. "Yes," I said. "It's not easy. But every action is necessary. Every decision calculated. For us, for the baby." He nodded. Sometimes all support needs to be his presence. Thursday evening, Madison sent a text that almost made me laugh. "Dad says you've completely appended everything. I hope you're proud of yourself." I replied calmly, "I'm proud of being responsible and protecting life, Madison. That's all." No reply. The weekend came, but not peace. I took a walk through the park, feeling the wind on my face, the city lights glowing as dusk settled. I imagined the baby, growing, learning, feeling the world before even entering it. Each kick, each small movement, a reminder of why I had drawn these lines. I realized something crucial. Family dynamics don't change overnight. Respect isn't given because you demand it. It's earned, often grudgingly, sometimes painfully, through consistent action. Sunday evening, Dad appeared at my apartment, unexpectedly. His expression was cautious, almost hesitant. "I see what you've done," he said. "I don't fully understand, but I can see that you were careful. Strategic, not reckless." I smiled softly.